Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester, joined as always by Mike Tagliere. We're on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, how was your weekend, man?
It was good. It was very good. I mean, like, Julio Jones scored another touchdown. Amari Cooper is seeing targets. I mean, what's not to like, right? Outside of the fact that Eric Ebron is still a thorn in my side.
I'll tell you what's not to like is being up 31 points in your fantasy game and going up against Zach Ertz. That's his only player left and he scores 33. That's not cool.
That is not cool at all.
And our guest today is Michael Beller of Sports Illustrated. You can follow him on Twitter at mbeller. Michael, thanks for taking the time to come on our show.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So we are going to talk waiver wire today. Guys, this is probably the ugliest waiver wire week of the season. There's like one player I'm especially excited about. Everyone else is kind of like, well, you know, if they make it past the fab budget round, then I'll pick them up. But there's really only one guy that I like. We are going to talk about everyone regardless, though, because some of you are in tougher situations where you need a win. You've got to pick someone up. And the way we're going to do it today is we're just going to go one position at a time, running back and then wide receiver. Let's dive into the news. But first, I wanted to tell you all we've got a new contest going on. So we gave away the signed Devontae Adams Packers helmet to George from Texas. And now we're going to be giving away a signed Dalvin Cook Vikings helmet. You can go to fantasypros.com/contest to enter. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel and fill out the form on fantasypros.com/contest, it's just 3 quick questions. You will get entered in 30 seconds. Again, that's fantasypros.com/contest. There has been a little bit of news. Obviously, we need to talk about Cooper Kupp, ACL torn. What are the Rams going to do, Michael?
You know, I guess we got a little bit of a window into this. What was that, maybe a month ago or so, when he missed a couple of games, and so we know not going to change too much of what they do, at least formationally. Josh Reynolds steps in. Still going to see a ton of 3 receiver, 1 running back, 1 tight end. Both Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee got a little bit of a target share bump, or at least maybe an absolute target bump when Kupp was out. So I think we should sort of have to assume that's going to be the case for the rest of the season. But for me, the big thing here is Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Todd Gurley. What seemed like they already couldn't take on more of a role in this offense, maybe they find a little bit more over the last 6 weeks of the season here.
Tags, I was wondering that first time if Josh Reynolds was just going to step right into the Cooper Kupp role. Now, obviously, they're different types of players, but you know the Rams, they use 3 wide receivers in 95+% of snaps. Nobody else in football does anywhere even close to that. So I wondered if Reynolds was going to be really fantasy relevant, but I agree. I think it's just Cooks, Woods, Gurley get the big bump.
Yeah, Reynolds is going to be like one of those guys that you could play in during bye weeks, even though we're nearing the end of those. Like we have this week, next week, and then bye weeks are done. So Josh Reynolds is nothing more than a guy that you could toss in your lineup in a good matchup where you think it's going to be a shootout where Goff's going to throw the ball 35 plus times. That's when you could take a shot on him because Robert Woods is the one who actually moved into the slot when Cooper Kupp was out. He played a lot more slot, and they had Josh Reynolds playing on the perimeter. The slot role is extremely important to this offense. So if anything, Robert Woods' role just continues to grow. And the thing is, the guy has now, ever since I think week 1 was the only week he hasn't totaled 70 yards in a game. Is it possible that Robert Woods is the most underappreciated fantasy football player this year?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I won't go as far as saying he definitely is, but there's definitely a chance. He's right up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the consistency of this offense between him, Brandon Cooks, and Cooper Kupp, for that matter, was ridiculous. And I feel bad for this team. They had Super Bowl aspirations. They were an offense that could hang with any defense in the league. And to see Cooper Kupp now go down for the year, that's rough, man.
I think they're still probably one of the 3 Super Bowl favorites. Wouldn't you agree, Michael?
Yeah, right. I mean, them, the Saints, the Chiefs, maybe if you're just trying to name the absolute 3. I think that the Saints maybe get a little bit more separation from the Rams with this Kupp injury. But yeah, I mean, are their aspirations quite as strong? Maybe not quite, but still, I don't think any of us would be surprised if we're talking about them as the Super Bowl champs a couple of months from now.
I mean, if Cooper Kupp was ruled out last second, how much would the Vegas line swing, Tags? Like maybe 0.3 points?
No, I think, well, I guess it depends on the opponent and how much they would need Kupp. If it was in a shootout, a game against maybe someone like the Chiefs or the Saints, I think it would swing the line maybe 1.5, 2 points.
Wow, I don't think so, man. I don't know.
If it were me doing the game, if it were me handicapping it, I would swing it that much.
Well, he's good. I don't know if he's really that good. I don't think it changes that much for the Rams. I think the Patriots are in that conversation too, and the Steelers with the way they've been playing lately. Those are the top 5. Those are the big dogs.
Wait, you're leaving the Patriots out?
I put the Patriots in there. Yeah.
I didn't hear them, but
yeah. So the 3 that Michael named, add the Patriots, add the Steelers. I think it's going to be 2 of those 5 in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to count out the Chiefs right now. That defense is playing phenomenal. They're getting a pass rush. The secondary's played very well, so much better than we thought. I think Sammy Watkins, the health of him, a lot depends on him. I don't know if he's going to play.
Well, he's expected back week 11. I don't know if you saw that.
I know they're saying that, but I don't know if I'm believing it. We've seen Sammy Watkins play through a foot injury before, and it wasn't pretty. Like, that was his one inefficient season in the NFL, and I pointed back to it, being like, playing through a foot injury is no joke, and you shouldn't do it. So, I mean, I guess we'll see, but with their bye in week 12, I'm still wondering if he plays this week or not.
I don't think that he should. We'll see what happens. There's a little bit of other news too. We don't really need to talk about it, but I did want to at least mention it. Marvin Jones, they were worried about his ACL, MCL, both undamaged. It's just a day-to-day bone bruise injury. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to keep his starting job. I know he only scored 3 points, but you know what? He played pretty good again, Tags.
Fitzpatrick, you think he played well?
400 yards. You don't think he played well?
No, I don't. I watched that game, and Ryan Fitzpatrick was not very good. What did they score? 3 points on offense? They didn't score.
Yeah, when a team has 480 total yards, I don't remember who posted this stat. I wish I could remember so I could give them credit. Their team averages 36 points. The fact that they averaged 3 was not entirely his fault.
I'm not saying it was entirely his fault, but I'm saying like the matchup was fantastic against Washington. Washington's been struggling in the secondary.
Yeah, and he led the NFL in passing yards last week.
But again, if you're not getting done when it counts, it doesn't really matter, does it? Like if you throw for 5,000 yards in a season and you throw 12 touchdowns, does that really matter?
I mean, if you throw for 5,000 yards, you can be my quarterback any day. What do you think, Michael? You can break the tie here.
10 yards per attempt, too. I mean, it's not like he was just soaking up a ton of volume, but if I had to lean one way here, I'm going to go with Tags. I mean, 4 turnovers. I mean,
it sounded like you were going to go with me. You were teasing me a little bit there.
It was, yeah, I mean, I think it sort of does bode well for Fitzpatrick in the future, right? I mean, yards per attempt, the efficiency was there, but you turn the ball over 4 times in one game. I can't necessarily say you played well in that individual game.
That is definitely a good point. Okay, so let's move on over to the waiver wire talk, and we're only going to be covering guys who are available in at least 50% of leagues. Like, we'll mention other players and where we would rank them, but primarily these are the guys that are going to be available in your league. And at running back, my number one guy, and it is not even close, is Rashaad Penny. Michael, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, right off the jump of the show here, it's an ugly week on the waiver wire, and I agree with you completely. Not only is Penny easily the number one running back, easily the number one guy, regardless of position, but really the only guy who I'm going to make any sort of aggressive move for this week. Took quite a while, right? We had a lot of Penny truthers among us back in July and August, and here we are now a couple of weeks away from Thanksgiving, and he's finally starting to deliver. It'll be interesting. The thing that worries me about him is I think as long as Chris Carson, or when Chris Carson is healthy, he's still going to be in command of this backfield. I could definitely be wrong there, and Pete Carroll's been known to have some backfield shenanigans, but that would be my one concern. Chris Carson played very well in his last, 3-4 healthy games, so that would be my concern if I'm making a move for Penny.
I'm not sure which one of them is the better running back. I liked Carson going into the season. I was calling Rashaad Penny fat, but he's in a lot better shape now. He looks really good. Like when they drafted him, everyone was so excited. Hey, this could be an RB1, and it looks like he finally could be. Tags, what is going to happen? Is it just going to be a split between Carson and Penny? Or are they finally just going to say, Penny, this is your backfield? I mean, either way, you sign this guy, but how much do you spend on him?
I don't think that you could even count out Mike Davis still. I know that some people are willing to say that, Rashaad Penny, we talked about this on last week's show, Bobby. Do you remember when we talked about this, saying that Mike Davis, yes, he's a start, but would it shock us if Rashaad Penny all of a sudden ended up with more touches? No, because that's what happens in the Seattle backfield. I just feel like you can never fully trust any of these running backs. With that being said, I do think Rashaad Penny is the number one ad of the week. We're at the point of the year where it's like, you're through with your bye weeks. So I'm okay with spending as much as you want on Rashaad Penny. And the reason I say that is because if you're done with your bye weeks, which you're probably going to be after this week, you should have the guys on your bench that could become league winners. Those guys like Spencer Ware, those guys like Malcolm Brown. These are the guys these are the guys you put on your bench just because people are holding that fab budget, waiting for an injury to happen and be like, I'm waiting to get a league winner. I'm waiting for this. Add those guys now, because guess what? You don't have to spend a single dollar of fab. You don't even need any fab left because they're going to be at the end of your bench just waiting. I don't know if Carson's going to come back. They're playing on a short week this week on Thursday against the Packers. The reason I don't love Penny, is it possible that they fall behind to the Packers? Absolutely. Am I saying it's going to happen? I don't know, but I do know this. Mike Davis is the one seeing targets out of the backfield. Rashaad Penny didn't see a single target in this game, which tells me that he's kind of game script dependent. And that's what worries me. He's only got 12 targets in the entire season.
Why, though? He can catch the ball. What are they doing there?
I know he can, but Mike Davis is the one who stepped up in absence of Chris Carson, and he has totaled 14 targets over the last 2 weeks. So he's clearly being used in that third down role. I think it's going to be a timeshare between the two. So Penny, I don't think he's going to be an RB1, unfortunately, but I do think that he can deliver a usable performance.
Michael, fantasy football aside, what do you think about the Eagles and the Seahawks and the Patriots using their backfields this way where you never know what's going to happen? Do you think that's good for their team, or do you think it's just kind of a mess?
Certainly worked for the Patriots, right? I mean, we've seen the proof of that this season, so they are doing it just fine. As for Philly and Seattle, really Philly is the one that stands out to me as one that I would like to see them commit to one of these guys a little bit more, just to give him a little bit more run and see if maybe he could be what they were thinking they were going to get out of Jay Ajayi before this season. Josh Adams has looked the best running it, right, the last few weeks, and I think part of that has to do with just that he has been the one to get the most consistent opportunity. I mean, Corey Clement had his little bit of time last night in that loss to Dallas, and he looked decent doing it, but Adams has been the only one who they've given any sort of extended run in the backfield from a on-the-ground standpoint, not doing anything through the air, to develop any sort of rhythm. So I would have to say him by default, only because he's been the only one who's really even had enough of a look coming out of the backfield the last few weeks to really be that guy.
He's got some Marshawn Lynch to him, too. I like Josh Adams. He's my number 2 pickup this week at running back, but I wouldn't spend more than like $5 on him.
Mm-hmm.
Tegs, what do you think about Josh Adams? Do you have him number 2, Elijah McGuire, maybe somebody else?
Yeah, I have Josh Adams down at number 5 among my running backs. I'm not excited about him. As I've mentioned with that backfield, it's another one you can't trust. And honestly, I would rather trust Seattle. At least I know Seattle runs the ball a ton. Like, and their offensive line is getting some push up front. Philadelphia is just not running the ball at all right now. And they don't really need to with Carson Wentz. He's throwing the ball fine. Obviously the game against Dallas, it was a letdown, but people continue to underestimate the Dallas defense. They've actually played really well this year.
Yeah, it's like, why are we betting against Dallas? Why would it be a letdown? Didn't you expect this against the Cowboys?
Kind of. I mean, that's the thing, is like you should have never expected a big game. No quarterback has really had a massive game against the Cowboys defense this year. But I mean, some players I'd rather own. Elijah McGuire is definitely one, but he's obviously going into his bye week. They're going to be coming out of the bye. He should be another week healthier. Isaiah Crowell looks like the same player he's always been. And then 2 other players I'd take above Josh Adams are Theo Riddick. I think that we kind of skipped over that injury, by the way. Marvin Jones, it came out that he has a bone bruise on his knee. He has nothing structural in terms of MCL or ACL, but he has a bone bruise and is considered day-to-day. We don't know if he's going to play this week, but what we do know is that Theo Riddick has kind of walked into that Golden Tate role in the offense, and he's going to see 6+ targets per game. And it's essentially a wide receiver you're going to play at running back, and that's fine for flex performance, especially with Jones knocked up, with Kerryon Johnson had to leave the game later in the game. Like, it looked like he re-injured his ankle, so he might be limited this coming week. So Theo Riddick against the Panthers could work out, but and then Jalen Samuels, he's someone that I would add over Josh Adams.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, just because he seems like he's the clear-cut handcuff to James Conner right now, and Le'Veon Bell's not going to show up.
Yeah, but he's a fine handcuff. He's probably the number 5 or 6 handcuff. And maybe, just maybe, they hold out James Conner. Le'Veon Bell doesn't return. It looks like Bell won't return. Maybe they hold out Conner this week. But do you want to start Jalen Samuels against Jacksonville? What is he at best, like RB20?
No, I mean, well, that's what I'm saying. Are you going to find someone better than RB20 on the waiver wire?
I mean, I'm just saying, that's his upside, because I think he's going to split the backfield with Ridley. I don't think he comes in and is a bell cow like Conner right away, and it's one bad matchup. So,
well, I don't think that's the thing. I wouldn't pick him up to play him this week, even if Conner were to sit. Like, if Conner sits, I'm not excited to play Jalen Samuels this week or anything like that. This is more for like a handcuff scenario where you just kind of have him on your bench. I would rather have him on my bench than Josh Adams.
So I made a list of my favorite handcuffs right now because, if you don't have week 11 buys to worry about, now's the time to pick up high upside backup running backs. Number 1, Spencer Ware. Number 2, Malcolm Brown. Number 3, Rod Smith behind Zeke. I think we forget how talented Rod Smith is, how good this offensive line is. Austin Eckler behind Melvin Gordon. He got a ton of run when Gordon was out. And then Samuel's at number 5. Is there anyone else you would add to that list, Michael?
Yeah, I would throw Gio Bernard in there just because we know that he's going to be the guy if anything were to happen to Mixon. I think he's got one of the purest moves into a starting role. I'm not sure that Chase Edmonds, for example, would handle all the touches that David Johnson does. I think we could say it's the same for a lot of these guys. I think
even Malcolm Brown that I named at number 2, I could see John Kelly come in. Yeah.
like Gio Bernard is the one guy out of all of them who I think that the running back role on his team wouldn't change very much. So I would put him in there as well. And I agree that when we're talking about all these, we're talking about guys like Josh Adams, even like Theo Riddick, who I agree with tags is a nice target this week because of Tate being gone and the injury to Marvin Jones. At this point, these handcuffs are pretty much the best backs available too, at least in terms of what they can add to a bottom line for a fantasy team. Buys are all but done, even with the 6 coming this week. And at this point, you're really shooting for someone who could really change your equation over the last couple of weeks of the regular season and into the playoffs if you get there.
Any of those 5 guys I mentioned, plus Gio Bernard, I definitely agree, would be RB1s if their starter was to go down. You can pick those guys up now if you have the bench, but if you don't, okay, I mean, I would assume any of them would require the absolute most fab money that you have to spend, which is why on Penny, there's 6 of them. It's going to happen to one of them, chances are. So with Penny, I only want to spend as much fab as I can to still have the most fab left in the league. Like I've got 91, 94, 97 fab bucks left in most of my leagues. And the next guy's at like 78. So I would spend like $19 in that league to make sure I have more fab in case one of these guys was to go down. Otherwise, I mean, if you can pick up those guys now for free, do it, and then grab Rashaad Penny for whatever it costs. Would you agree with that, Tegs?
Yeah, basically, like that's the idea, is that I'm willing to spend whatever you have to on the waiver wire if you need someone now to fill a role. But at the same time, that's your bench. Stack it with upside. I would rather have someone like Spencer Ware on my bench than Michael Crabtree if I'm not going to use Crabtree on a weekly basis.
No, why would you not use Michael Crabtree, man?
Because he's not good.
What? Michael Crabtree gets a ton of... Are we talking about like good in real life? Or are we talking about good for fantasy football? Because he gets a ton of targets.
Well, good for fantasy. Like Michael Crabtree is not going to win you a fantasy title. Let's just be clear about that.
I mean, if I can get him as my number 2, number 3 wide receiver instead of one of these bums against the schedule he has remaining, sign me up, man. Bring it on.
I'd rather have Valdez-Scantling.
I mean, it's close. I don't have a problem with Valdez-Scantling, but you're saying like drop Michael Crabtree instead of one of these backup running backs?
Well, I'm just saying I would rather own Spencer Ware if you're relying on Crabtree for starter potential, like that's on you. Like you have to deal with that, and like obviously you can't drop him if you need him.
He's a lot more reliable than most wide receiver 3s, man. Anytime you can give me someone who's going to get 7-8 targets a game, I mean, what is he? He's top 15 in targets in the NFL.
But he's the number 40 wide receiver.
I mean, he hasn't had the schedule he's going to have the rest of the season. Look who the Raiders are playing, man. They've got the easiest remaining schedule of any team for receivers.
But if they go to Lamar Jackson, they're going to be throwing a whole bunch less. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Lamar Jackson's going to throw multiple touchdowns a game.
That's totally fair. that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's talk about some of these other running backs. We talked about Penny. We talked about Josh Adams. There's one other one that stands out to me. I like Elijah McGuire a lot. He did lead the team with 6 targets again, 6 carries, 57 total yards in a bad matchup, bad game script. I think he's kind of game script proof with the way that the Jets are using him. He's leading the team in snaps. I think he's got a big upside as well. I've got him right there with Josh Adams for $4 fab. Michael, how do you feel about Elijah McGuire? Is he a decent pickup?
Yeah, he's my number 2 guy among running backs in the wire this week, just behind Penny. And for a lot of the reasons you said, I do think that he's game script independent. I think he's going to be totally fine in games where they're, if they manage to stay in a game the rest of the season, even in games where they're getting blown out as they did against the Bills. I think he's going to have enough of a workload. I think that, what you saw Trenton Cannon getting involved as well, I think that had a little bit of something to do with the fact that this game was out of hand by the time halftime rolled around. So I think Elijah McGuire is a relatively safe bet for like 15 opportunities, maybe 13 opportunities per game, talking carries plus targets. And I think we've seen enough from him over the year and change that he's been in the league, not necessarily giving him credit for the time he spent on PUP to start this season, to think that he can do enough with that he should be of interest to most fantasy owners. A guy who I could see, popping and having a couple of decent weeks where you feel okay with him in your starting lineup, even into the fantasy playoffs.
Now, Tags, you said that you've got Adams as your number 5 running back. I would assume McGuire's in that conversation ahead of him. Who else is there?
Yeah, he was my number 2 running back in that conversation. So I like McGuire, but the thing is like when I go through these rankings again in my mind, it's like talking about him. It's like I still have to keep in mind that some people need players for bye weeks, and McGuire's on a bye week, so it's really tough. But like looking at it from a long-term perspective, like let's pretend you're done with bye weeks, that you're not worried about them anymore. It's just like you want to know who to grab off the waiver wire, who's the best guy to have on your bench. would you rather have Maguire or Ware? Now, Maguire, he obviously gives you performance without an injury in front of him. If something were to happen to Isaiah Crowell, Maguire would obviously see a bigger role, but would it be big enough to where it's like, okay, would I rather have that than Spencer Ware on my bench? What's your take on that, Beller?
I think it depends on your roster makeup. I think if you are someone who is pretty loaded, this is week 10, you're 8-2 or something like that after this week, you've obviously got a pretty good team, then I think you can afford to take that shot on someone who maybe will never get more than 5 carries, but if Kareem Hunt goes down, suddenly turns into an RB1. If you're someone who needs every single point they can get through week 13 just to get into the playoffs, then I would lean a little bit more toward Elijah Maguire. So for me, it's not, I don't think there is a one size fits all definition for any of these players. So I think it's going to depend a lot on where each individual owner sits, who is going to be more valuable to them. Certainly someone like Spencer Ware, Malcolm Brown, these are the guys with the ceiling, not guys like Maguire, or I would even throw Rashaad Penny into that group too.
Oh, really? I think Penny has a pretty good ceiling. If he was to take over this starting job, I mean, we've seen what Chris Carson has done with that. I mean, I'm not saying he'd be an RB1 like Spencer Ware, but I would take a top 15 running back for sure.
But I agree with Tags what he said earlier, that even if Penny is the guy or the number one, I don't think Mike Davis is going anywhere to a place where Rashaad Penny is going to be getting himself 20 touches a game. I just don't see that sort of role. I could see him securing 65% of 20 running back touches per game, but not 20 for himself.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Any love for Alfred Morris, Jalen Samuels, anything, Tags?
Samuels is one of those guys that I would rather have over Adams, as I mentioned, but I mean, I'm not excited. He's not a player that you're going to grab thinking you're going to start him at any time. It's just a guy that relies on an injury. And I do think that Steelers offense is very friendly to running backs. And obviously you saw him catch a touchdown pass, being a former tight end utility player. He's going to catch passes out of the backfield. And that's very useful in a high scoring Pittsburgh offense. So I do think that he's worth a stash over someone like Josh Adams.
All right, guys, let's move on over to wide receivers. But first I want to talk about the sponsor of today's show, Tommy John. Guys, the holidays are fast approaching and things are about to get uncomfortable. Between all the crazy travel schedules and awkward family gatherings, now is not the time for nutcrackers or wedgies. Thankfully, there's Tommy John, the revolutionary clothing company that's redefining comfort for men and women. Tommy John is the most comfortable underwear on the planet. I have some, and you can believe me, it is definitely true. Keeping you neat, nestled, and all in one place. They're the perfect gift, especially for guys who constantly adjust. Plus, Tommy John's new women's line has been called life-changing. Their loungewear is luxuriously soft and mistletoe-worthy. And their latest innovation for men, the Stay Tucked dress shirt, is a game-changer too. So if you're still on the fence wondering if Tommy John would be a memorable gift, think about all the adjusting and tugging you'll never have to endure or see again. And with limited edition holiday gifts, there's something for everyone on your list, naughty or nice. Tommy John, no adjustment needed. Give the gift of mind-blowing comfort this holiday season with limited edition holiday gifts from Tommy John, plus save 20% off your first order at TommyJohn.com/fantasypros. That's TommyJohn.com/fantasypros for 20% off. All right, like I said, there's really not too much behind Penny that I love. But at the wide receiver position, I've got Anthony Miller as my top pickup. I mean, we figured this was going to happen eventually. Tags and I, we've talked about it a lot. He keeps getting 6 or 7 targets. He's talented. But I'm not so sure we can rely on this Bears defense. Beller, do you have him as your number 1 wide receiver pickup? And if so, how much would you spend for him?
I do, actually. I do. And I think it's a relatively easy number 1 for me this week. Now, I will say that part of that has to do with just that it's a pretty barren wide receiver position on the waiver wire this week. It's not like I'm calling Anthony Miller a pick him up and start him. He is a wide receiver 3 for sure the rest of the season. I'm not saying it's that, but I just think that he's clearly a half step or a full step in front of pretty much everyone else who's available. I'd be willing to go, depending on, I don't know about dollar amount, but I'd be willing to go, 5% or so of what I've got remaining to get Anthony Miller. What I liked about him best, what he did in week 10, is that he had this monster game in a game where Allen Robinson came back and also had a monster game in a contest where Tariq Cohen didn't have a big game but did catch 6 passes. So the Bears were still getting him, basically just as involved as he usually is. And then you saw Taylor Gabriel drop down to, I believe, 0 targets in this game. So what I like is that he was able to do this alongside pretty much everyone else in Chicago's offense doing what they do. it speaks well to where he is in this offense. It speaks well to where Matt Nagy and Mitch Trubisky see him fitting in for the rest of the season.
Tags, do you disagree with that? Do you think there's more upside here, or is he kind of like a Keke Coutee, just in a better role?
Oh, man, I don't even know if I want to say he's in a better role than Coutee.
I mean, I think Miller's moved past Gabriel and is the number 2. I think Coutee's the clear number 3. Now, a better offense, but...
It depends. It depends on how you look at it. Because Gabriel, so he did see 3 targets. He didn't catch any of them. There was one target that was a beautifully thrown ball, but it was a great defensive play. I think it was Nevin Lawson that got his hand in there in coverage where it was a bomb to Gabriel. It was like a 45, 50-yard pass in the end zone that the ball just missed the touchdown. And I think we would have looked at Gabriel a lot different had that been caught. We can't forget that Anthony Miller, he hasn't, this was the first game all year where he's topped 49 yards. So he hasn't been like an every week starter or anything like that. I felt like his role was growing with Allen Robinson out of the lineup, and they were developing chemistry between him and Trubisky. They have looked better the last couple weeks. Trubisky's looked better the last couple weeks. So he is climbing up my chart. Do I think that he's an every week start going forward? I don't. I just think that there's so many options in this Bears offense that can kind of get it done any given week. It could be Robinson. It could be Miller. It could be Gabriel, Trey Burton, Tariq Cohen. You have Adam Shaheen coming back soon. It's just like there's so many options where it's like you definitely want a part of an offense like that where they're going to be a higher scoring offense, but I don't know if Miller is like someone that you have to play every week. So I kind of agree with you guys in the fact that it's really not a great week for getting players off the waiver wire that you can start every single week.
And if somebody's not open, Trubisky's just going to run the ball. He doesn't need people to be open. Even if people are open, he just runs the ball because he's the man. And if you need a streamer this week, it's not Anthony Miller. You can't play him against the Vikings. Would you agree, Beller?
Yeah. And the thing is that it's also one of like there are 6 teams on bye, but it's not like the fantasy community as a whole is at Buffalo, Cleveland, Miami, the Jets, San Francisco. It's a pretty easy 6-team bye week. So I agree with you there. And I definitely agree with you. And I don't think you're going to get any sort of pushback from Tags or me on Mitch being the man.
Yeah, I love Mitch Trubisky, except that he cost me a bet. Because I bet on Blake Bortles over him like an idiot. Okay, let's move on to the number 2. Tags, we'll let you take this one. Who's your number 2 behind Anthony Miller?
So I have John Ross. I don't think A.J. Green's going to play the rest of the season. And I've been saying that as him with a foot injury, playing through that as a pass catcher, it's not the greatest thing.
Why would he? Yeah.
Yeah, and like knowing this Bengals team and how bad that they look, I just don't think there's any reason to. Ross had somewhat, I don't want to say it was a tough matchup against New Orleans, but being the number 1 receiver in the offense against Lattimore, it was going to be a tougher matchup for him. So,
well, kind of. I mean, he was playing outside and Boyd was playing inside, but he's not the number 1. I don't think that's the right way to say it.
No, well, he is the number 1 in terms of like who he's going to draw in coverage because Lattimore is actually covering him this game. So, I mean, he plays at Baltimore this week, so it's another bad matchup because Baltimore just stuns receivers over and over. But after that, you get Cleveland, you get Denver, then you have the Chargers, Oakland, Cleveland again. So, I mean, there's like an up and down to the schedule, but knowing that it's just like he's a guy that can get a deep ball, he's going to see more targets going forward. So if he gets a deep ball, it could, make a wide receiver 3 performance on one play. And he is being targeted in the red zone a little bit. So just knowing the lack of options there in Cincinnati, I think that John Ross is worth a pickup.
So I've got Ross right up there. I would spend $3 fab on him. I don't think you'll really need to. I think you could probably pick him up for free. And if you don't, you could get the guys right next to him, Quincy Enunwa, Devontae Parker. I mean, you've got Ross against Baltimore. That's basically a bye. And then Enunwa and Parker both have byes. I've got QT as my number 2. Not by much, though, just because you can actually use him this week and I think the rest of the season. Now, like Miller, I wouldn't be excited about that, but those top 5, Miller, QT, Parker, Enunwa, Ross, they're all really tight. Michael, is there one of these guys that you like more than the other?
I do like QT only because of, go back to week 9 and Demaryius Thomas's first game with Houston. 3 targets, caught them all, 61 yards. But obviously he didn't take any of those deep balls, the balls that were reserved for Will Fuller. Now, QT, not necessarily that style of receiver either, but I think if anyone is going to step up and take those sorts of targets, I think he's the favorite because I really don't see them altering what DeAndre Hopkins does too much. So if someone's going to get the balls that those plays they were reserving for Will Fuller, I would at least feel comfortable enough with it maybe being QT that I'm willing to make that bet. It could certainly turn out to be a losing bet, but I think there's enough value in that possibility when you compare it to the rest of the guys who are available who we're talking about in this discussion that, hey, I'll take a shot on this. If it pans out, then awesome. I'm getting a deep threat and a great offense or at least a good offense. And if it doesn't, I didn't really spend anything to take the bet.
He's been healthy for 3.5 games, and he's got 30 targets so far in his NFL career, and that was with Will Fuller there. I mean, Tags, you probably think Will Fuller's better than Demaryius Thomas, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this stage in their career, yeah, they're different receivers, though.
And especially with Thomas not knowing the playbook.
Right. And that's the thing. So QT, I want to put an asterisk here because I would have had QT higher on my list if I knew that he was going to play. So the thing is like someone asked him after the Denver game, they said, "Oh, so you're going to be back after the bye in week 11, right?" And he's like, "I'm not coming back until I'm 100%." Like, cause he was trying to play through a hamstring injury when he went down, and he like the first 4 games he played this year, he was playing through a hamstring injury the entire time, and he re-aggravated it. So he said, "I'm not going to play if I'm not okay." And the thing is,
doesn't he want to make the playoffs though? Like, the Titans are right on their back. I know it's the AFC South sucks really bad, but I mean, if he plays, his team has a better chance, even if he's not healthy.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think so because if they have no depth behind him on the roster, like that's why they went out and got Demaryius Thomas, is because they needed that. And like, so if he re-injures himself, then you're talking about shutting him down for the rest of the regular season. That's what I don't want to happen. They're playing Washington this week, and it's Fabian Moreau. He's been their best cornerback, arguably, in the slot this year for them. And then they have Tennessee, Logan Ryan in the slot, probably one of he's I'd say he's an average to above average slot corner. And then after that, it's Cleveland and Indianapolis and the Jets. So those are all great matchups. Then you get Philly after that, who we just found out that Ronald Darby is out for the year. So there's a lot of pluses to QT. It's just getting over these first couple weeks here. That's the part where I'm like a little nervous about him, but I do think that he definitely should be on a roster because I think he can deliver wide receiver 3 numbers once he comes back to the lineup because he is that safety valve over the middle of the field.
You know what's really crazy, guys? I was looking at the AFC playoff picture earlier today, and if the playoffs started today, the Patriots, for the first time since 2009, would not have a first-round bye. Wow, how are they this good? This is like 60s Celtics good.
Oh, I mean, obviously, that's the thing is like that's why I refuse to count the Patriots out, even though they lost a game to the Titans that everybody expected them to win. But yeah, it's one game. I'm not going to count out the Patriots.
It's going to be it's Pittsburgh and Kansas City who have the first 2 spots right now.
That's right. Yeah, Kansas City's 9-1, Pittsburgh is 6-2-1, and the Patriots are 7-3-0.
Yep.
So not only do they not have it right now, not have a bye right now, but I mean that none of us would be surprised if that's. I mean, the Chiefs are almost locked in, I would say, to a first round bye, and
with the way the Steelers are playing right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about the Steelers as the 2 seed in the AFC.
And if the Texans win their 7th straight game next week, they would be tied with the Patriots. So, I mean, it's gonna be a tough road, but. I mean, you put the Patriots in the playoffs, I think they've got as good of a chance as anybody.
Yeah.
I don't care how good the Steelers are playing, how good the Saints are. I would probably put my money on Tom Brady and the Patriots again.
Man, you want to stay out of that 4 spot, though, right? Because, I mean, it looks like that'll be likely the Chargers. I mean, how about that as a first-round AFC playoff game? Chargers at Patriots?
I think the Chargers have more talent than the Patriots. Yeah, that would not be an ideal situation.
Yeah, the Patriots have Tom Brady. So, I mean, like that's like it's like the cheat code of quarterbacks in the playoffs.
What if Phillip Rivers was on the Patriots, though? Would we be saying that about Phillip Rivers?
I mean, there's not many quarterbacks I would rather have on my team quarterbacking through the playoffs than Tom Brady. Like the dude's like he has ice running through his veins. Like he legit is like when I talk about Aaron Rodgers as the best quarterback of all time, the most talented, I should say. I think that Tom Brady is clearly the most clutch and most accomplished. So if I'm in the playoffs, it's tough to say that I want any other quarterback outside of Tom Brady.
Yeah, that's totally fair. All right, wide receivers after these top 5. We've got Danny Amendola, who keeps getting a lot of targets. Dante Moncrief, who is the clear-cut number 1 in Jacksonville, still not saying much. Willie Snead, consistent week to week. Josh Doxson's been doing some stuff lately. Zay Jones had 8 receptions. I don't know where that came from. Do you like any of these guys moving forward, Tags?
I mean, Willie Snead is like the consistent floor guy, but again, going to Lamar Jackson, it would change a lot of things in the offense. And Willie Snead, the reason he's performing is because he gets, 5 to 8 targets per game, and he's catching and he's posting 52 yards or more, and like essentially like 80 or 90% of his games. So he is what he is. He's not going to win you a league, but he might not lose it for you either if you have an injury like someone to Cooper Kupp, and you just need someone to put in your lineup where it's like, I need someone to just not lose it for me. If you're looking for a ceiling, I think Josh Reynolds is a guy that I might add just because he offers more upside in a matchup where it's like it's a projected shootout, I'd rather toss him in my lineup than a boring player like Willie Snead if I know the game counts on that. So Reynolds is in that conversation. Doxson is somewhat boring.
Yeah, I've got him last out of the bunch, even behind Zay Jones.
I have him at number 8, right behind Moncrief, but I'm not excited about any of these guys, though.
Well, what about Amendola? You didn't even mention him. I mean, 11 targets, 7, 6, 7, 10.
Oh, I know. But Brock Osweiler just continues to get worse, like legit worse. Like, man, Brock Osweiler.
I mean, that's fine, but I'll take 14 fantasy points every week in PPR leagues.
Well, that's the thing is, like, in PPR, he's scored 9 point something the last couple weeks, and that's kind of where I view him. It's kind of like a Willie Snead type option but is it as good as offense as Baltimore? I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I'm with tags that no one here gets me excited. If I was really forced to make an argument for someone, I would maybe go Moncrief, only because of the fact that he has sort of made himself the clear number one in Jacksonville. 38 targets in Jacksonville's last 5 games, caught 20 of them for 304 yards. So another one of these guys who fits in where, like, he's not going to give you a 0. He's not going to go out and give you a 0 points or 2 points. He's probably going to give you at least 7, 8, 9 points, which isn't anything to write home about, but he's not going to kill you either. And is the one guy who I could see, going on a little bit of a touchdown binge as well. So he's the one who I would, if I had to do something in this range, he would be the one who I would go after. But again, it's not like someone who I'm getting super excited about claiming this week.
He's getting the red zone targets. He has almost twice as many air yards as D.D. Westbrook and Keelan Cole in that time. He's got 115 yards after the catch. He's the number one.
No, that's what I'm trying to tell you, dude, is that, like, Moncrief, not many people realize he is the number 13 wide receiver in targeted air yards. Okay.
Wow.
What? The whole season?
Listen, yes, it's ahead of Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Robert Woods, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, in terms of team target share, like in terms of their percentage target air yards. So he's seeing a 33% of the targeted air yards in the Jags offense, and it's only increasing because Keelan Cole has been eliminated from the offense. Like, I don't know if you realize this, Bobby, but he's playing behind DJ Chark now.
I do realize it, and I think it's the right move based on how he's been playing this year. I was a big Keelan Cole fanboy, right? And I remember, tags, both of us were like laughing at the idea that Dante Moncrief would have any fantasy relevance, and here we are.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I mean, when you get the targets he is, the thing is, he had like 98 yards this week, right? But 80 of them came on a missed tackle opportunity for the Colts defense, and he took it to the house for 80 yards. So outside of that, he had, 2 catches for 18 yards.
That happens, though. I mean, when you get that many targets, that kind of thing happens, which is why I'm surprised that you hate Michael Crabtree so much.
Yeah, I do. I really do.
By the way, remember on our DFS show when we were I don't know if we laughed out loud at Davis, but I could tell you were laughing in your head when he locked in Corey Davis as his lock of the week. I did too. And he was right. What do you know?
Yeah, that was, Marcus Mariota's playing well. Corey Davis, Stephon Gilmore came out and said that he just was outplayed. He said Corey Davis he's a legit superstar.
He is good, man. He looks really good going up against Stephon Gilmore and doing that kind of stuff. So, and you're right, Mariota, he looked like trash for a while. I think it was the injury. I think that he's finally healthy. And I mean, I'm not going to go as far as saying he's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL, but he's a lot better than one of the worst now.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, no other wide receivers to really talk. People actually probably want us to talk about Brandon Marshall. Michael, do you think he has any fantasy relevance?
No.
Okay, yeah, let's just move on then to tight end. And we've got Jeff Heuerman coming back from his bye after that huge game. What did he have, 12 receptions or something? I have 10 receptions. I have no idea what to expect going forward. Is he your top tight end pickup, Michael, or is it Ricky Seals-Jones?
Yeah, Heuerman is my number one guy. And again, it's sort of like I talked about with Anthony Miller. It's almost a number one by default, right? Who else could possibly be the number one? I mean, I guess you sort of like the fact that Seals-Jones got 9 targets, but it's not like he's necessarily been hurting for volume. He's not a 9 target per game guy, but we've seen him have plenty of games this season with 6, 7 targets and not really do much with it.
Yeah, and 9 Josh Rosen targets is not really 9 targets.
Exactly. So the ceiling, I think, for pretty much every other regularly available tight end is being part of the stream discussion every week. I think Heuerman is someone who has a best case scenario where he puts together a low end tight end once, 6 weeks here for the rest of the way.
Yeah, Tags, do you agree with all that?
I'm going with Seals-Jones here, man.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I liked Seals-Jones last week, and he worked out. Like, it worked out. Now, the game script obviously favored him in that role, and I think that's what some people are going to be concerned about in this game, is game script and how much does Josh Rosen actually pass. But
if no one watches this game, does it actually count for fantasy? Like Arizona face Oakland?
I don't know if many people are going to want to watch this game, to be honest with you. But I'm telling you, Seals-Jones is my favorite streamer at tight end this week. So the Raiders, if you haven't paid attention, like, this team is legit terrible against tight ends. So check this out. They've allowed 11.9 yards per target to tight ends. There is no other team in the NFL who allows more than 9.9. We're talking about a legit 2.0 yard difference to tight end. Like, it is nuts. The production that they're allowing an 80.9% completion ratio to them, and they're allowing a touchdown every 7.8 targets to them. Ricky Seals-Jones under Byron Leftwich has been a lot more involved. He's run more routes the last 2 weeks than he did all season. So like, he's being involved in the offense. Larry Fitzgerald is what he is. I'm not saying that he's bad or anything like that, but he's at the later stages in his career. Christian Kirk is slowly being phased out now that Larry Fitzgerald is getting more targets, but Ricky Seals-Jones is starting to become a favorite of the offense. And again, this matchup is just too good to pass up.
Ricky Seals-Jones is so much more athletic than Heuerman too. I mean, Heuerman's not bad, but
yeah,
those are some good stats, man. I just can't, pass up he just had 11 targets going into the bye. I don't know what to make of that. If I'm betting on someone, I'm betting on the guy who just had all that volume.
No love for Jonnu Smith after getting 3 targets the last 2 weeks?
No, man. I'm sure people wanted us to talk about him, so I'm glad you brought him up. But, kind of like Brandon Marshall, I don't even want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Touchdowns in both those games.
That's right, yeah. Just like Chris Herndon. Where did he go, by the way?
He went to Josh McCown Island.
That's right. I don't know. I'm surprised that Josh McCown did not play well, because I really thought that he was going to be fine. Like, he's a lot better than Sam Darnold. At least I thought he was going to be.
I mean, Darnold's put in bad I've been saying all along that offensive line is terrible. The passing options, how they're using them, like not putting Enunwa back in the slot, keeping, bad Jermaine Kearse there. Robbie Anderson's dinged up. Like, the offense is just in a bad spot right now, man. I didn't expect Sam Darnold to do much, and I think by keeping him out there, it was doing more harm than good. So I think it's better for him that he's in a boot and not playing right now.
Every time that we go into the season, I have a hard time imagining that there's going to be a terrible team in the NFL. Like, maybe this year it was going to be the Dolphins. But we've got like 5 legitimately just horrible teams.
Yeah, there's some bad teams in the NFL right now. But I mean, the Bills, they were a team that we didn't expect to score like 2 touchdowns this week, and then they go for 41 against the Jets. So
yeah, second time they've done that crap this season.
Any given Sunday, man.
Yeah. So who's your guys' favorite to get the first overall pick? Because I'm going to be doing an early mock draft article here soon. We've got the Giants, Raiders, 49ers, Bills, Cardinals, Jets. Those are really the only 6 that I think have a chance.
I think I'd go the Raiders.
Yeah, it's hard not to say the Raiders at this point.
They've got to have games left with the Chiefs and the Chargers, so they've got some tough games left, and that looks like if I would be confident saying that any team is just done and ready for 2019 to be here, I would say they're the most quitting team right now than any of these other teams that are in the mix for the number 1 pick. I mean, a lot of these teams seem like they're not gonna rip off 4 wins to end the season.
Yeah.
But they're not rolling over for opponents either.
I think they're ready for the 2020 season.
Yeah, right?
No, seriously.
Get to Vegas.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, they have 5 first-round picks over the next 2 years. So let's fast forward to 2020 and see how the Raiders are doing with John Gruden.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I think it would be kind of crazy if it worked out for the Giants where they go get Saquon Barkley, and then they still get the number 1 pick and take Justin Herbert. But let's say Herbert's off the board, okay? There's no other quarterbacks that really stand out. Do the Raiders reach for a quarterback at number 1 and then trade Derek Carr, or do you think they take like Nick Bosa?
I don't think they draft a quarterback. I think that they mean it when they say they're standing by Carr. I feel like that they don't. I think they know that they don't have many options around him right now. They have to rebuild the offensive line. This team has too many holes right now. That's the problem. And it's like if they feel like Derek Carr is competent, and by all means, it sounds like they're committing to him for the future. I think the Raiders might try and trade back and even acquire even more picks because they just have so many holes in that team. I don't know, man. I haven't looked too much into the draft class, but that team has so many holes.
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving on with the waiver wire, guys. We'll go to the quarterback position. And there's not much in the way of streamers. I guess Dak Prescott.
I think this is interesting that the beat writer for the Ravens for The Athletic, he's saying that even if Flacco doesn't go, that there's no guarantee that Lamar would be the guy.
Wow.
And that they could go in another direction. like Robert Griffin, for example.
He's been on the roster the entire time. Like, why wouldn't they have let him go if he wasn't going to start?
Yeah, I think that's sort of what he's getting at, which would also be interesting. Lamar's obviously the fun one for fantasy purposes.
Maybe they'll run 2 quarterbacks in the backfield.
Why not? I mean, Marty Morningwig is known as the most creative offensive play caller. Why the heck not?
That would be a lot of fun, man. And then they could like run the option, and then the option turns into a pass, except it would be incomplete.
Oh, my God.
You'd have to have the Bengals play along on the other side, though, and get Andy Dalton and Jeff Driscoll.
I think that's a really good call.
Dalton and Jeff Driscoll out there as well, and just have all 4 of these guys at once.
Yeah, do yourself a favor and just pick up Dak Prescott instead.
Okay, yeah, so Dak Prescott's going up against Atlanta, but you've also got Marcus Mariota, who's playing a lot better. Now, it's not the best matchup, but going up against Indianapolis is a quality matchup as well. Would you rather have Prescott than Mariota?
I would, yeah. Prescott, like, people don't realize, like, he's actually been getting work done. Like, he's rushed for at least 33 yards, I think, in 4 of the last 5 games. The Falcons, we obviously saw Baker Mayfield, what he did to them this past week, and that's nothing new. The Falcons have allowed, ever since they lost Keanu Neal and Deion Jones in week 1, every quarterback has scored at least 16 fantasy points against them, and all but one has scored at least 20 fantasy points against them. And that was Alex Smith, who was down 3 offensive linemen, down to starting 2 receivers. Like, so many issues there. The Falcons' pass defense, that game has shootout written all over it, where they can kind of go up against the Falcons through the air. That game is in Atlanta, so you don't have to worry about weather conditions. I just believe that Dak Prescott is I think he's the quarterback I would pick up to stream if you're into streaming quarterbacks this week.
Michael, who do you have, Dak or Marcus Mariota?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that a lot of times people in the fantasy world put a little bit too much importance on matchup. For me, it's really just a tiebreaker. But this is one of those situations where the tiebreaker comes into play. Atlanta hasn't been able to slow anyone down through the year, and Dak has played, I think, a little bit better than he's been getting credit for. I'm not saying that, he's secretly a top 10 quarterback, but a little better than it necessarily looks like if you just take a look at his surface stats. I think he ends up having himself a pretty nice game in Atlanta this week.
I've got Dak as well. Let's move on over to DST. And the streamers here, it's not that exciting. I mean, you've got Arizona against Oakland, but Derek Carr's not that turnover prone. He's just not going to score any points. You've got some other ones like Indianapolis versus Tennessee is going to be popular. Washington faced the Texans offensive line. Any others that you like here, Michael?
Now, again, a pretty slow week. And I think it's going to have a lot to do with exactly who you have available in your league. I think that defense is the one position to me that doesn't necessarily follow a pattern across leagues where we can look at and say, all right, 50% these teams are going to regularly be available. So I think the ones that you've mentioned are really the only ones that jump out to me from a perspective of teams that are going to be regularly available going into week 11.
But you're right, though. I mean, there's a chance that Baltimore, maybe the best defense in the NFL, is available. They're only owned in 54% of leagues. They go up against Cincinnati. The Steelers go up against Jacksonville. They're owned in 55% of leagues. Carolina against Detroit, 47% of leagues. So it really does depend on your team, and that's why I want to tell you about my playbook, where you can just upload your team. We've got something called the Waiver Wire Assistant, and it tells you what the experts think, who's the best available in your league. That way, if we don't answer all your questions, you can look at it on the waiver wire. Now, Tags, is there a DST that stands out to you?
Yeah, Arizona is like my best option by far. It's not even close. Like the Raiders, you're right. Derek Carr has not thrown an interception in his last 4 games, but that doesn't stop me from streaming defenses against them. Like the Raiders their offense has only scored more than 6 points one time in the last 4 weeks. Their offensive line has allowed him to be sacked. It's at least 4 times in 3 of the last 4 games. There's just so many reasons. Like they're not scoring points. They're allowing sacks left and right. The only thing that Arizona technically, even though they've been getting better under Steve Wilkes, it's like that defense just took time to figure it out against the run. And Oakland just doesn't have much of a run game. That game is in Arizona. You typically want to get your streamers at home, and the defenses that have played against them have been putting up massive fantasy points. So if I could attack that team, I'm going to do that. So the Cardinals are my best streamer by far.
All right, guys. So this is what I want to do. We still have a little bit more time, and I want to talk about players who might be available in some of these leagues and where you would put them if they were on the waiver wire. Chris Godwin, Tags, where would you have him?
Godwin, where would I take him? I would take Godwin over Anthony Miller, so he'd be my number 1 receiver.
He'd be mine too, but I mean, you wouldn't take him over Rashaad Penny, would you?
Depending on my team need. Like if you don't need a running back and you're just taking Penny just to have him on your bench, I guess I mean, it really depends on what you need. But if you're just looking for a pure stash, I think running backs are harder to come by. So yeah, I'd say I'd rather have Penny.
All right, Michael, let's expand it, and we'll include Godwin and Randall Cobb. If Randall Cobb's out there, would you rather have him, Miller, or Chris Godwin?
Godwin would be my number one. I think I would rather have Miller than Cobb, but very close. I just worry about, Randall Cobb has had a decent number of targets in pretty much every game he's played this season, but it hasn't really translated to meaningful production. And I think Valdez-Scantling has pretty much cemented his role in the offense. Aaron Jones, obviously, with what we saw from him, there's going to be, I think, more volume going to this running game now that they've got this guy that Mike McCarthy's willing to admit is the best running back option on the team. So Cobb's not someone who gets me too excited. Godwin would be my number one out of those three.
I think I like Equanimeous St. Brown, too, to pass up Randall Cobb as the number 3. So I've got the list the same as you, Godwin and then Miller and then Cobb. Let's get 3 more names, okay? Courtland Sutton, Tyrell Williams, Mike Williams. Tags, you go first.
Courtland Sutton, hands down. That one's pretty easy for me. Real quick, one name I want to note before we skip over his name, because he's not on our waiver wire list this week, but he's one of those guys for one of those high upside handcuffs. Don't forget about Jamal Williams, because if something happens to Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams is suddenly not in a 3-way timeshare anymore, and he's like the lead back. It's not to say that he's the most electric back or anything like that.
I mean, he was an RB1 when he was the workhorse last year. He's not very good, but...
Yes, and that's the thing. Ty Montgomery's gone. If Aaron Jones goes down, all of a sudden he's like the only running back, and he's going to get 20-plus touches in an Aaron Rodgers-led offense. So he's a name that we really should put on this waiver wire list this week, because I think he's one of the higher upside handcuffs.
Beller, do you like either of the Williams guys for Los Angeles?
I like Tyrell a little better, but I like Godwin better than both of them. I like Courtland Sutton certainly better than all of them. Again, both those guys, right? They are touchdown dependent, boom or bust, big time roller coaster rides with those two guys. I favor Tyrell. I admit it's a little bit of recency bias, but Tyrell's just been a little bit more involved lately. I give him a little bit, just that alone. When we're talking about guys who are getting this few looks per game, the fact that Tyrell's been more involved lately makes him the better Williams to go after for me.
Yeah, Mike Williams has 7 receptions in his last 5 games, so I don't think he has any relevance whatsoever. Let's go 3 more wide receivers, then we'll move on over to running back. Traquan Smith, Taylor Gabriel, DJ Moore. Beller, you're first on this one.
I like Gabriel the best, and I don't love any of these 3. I understand the Traquan Smith infatuation from the standpoint of it's the Saints, it's Drew Brees. There's no bad way to get invested in this team, but he's maxed out his snap rate, right? He's playing 70% of snaps for this team. That's not going to go up any higher, and he's still getting 3.5 targets per game. So he doesn't really excite me very much. Tag said it earlier in the show, right? Chicago's offense as a whole is showing up pretty much every week, but it could be Allen Robinson one week, Anthony Miller the next. So I'll take the shot that the roulette wheel's going to land on a Taylor Gabriel week one of these weeks.
I got DJ Moore out of these 3 guys because I'm looking at their schedule, and I know that it's not like a sure bet that he's going to get the kind of targets that Taylor Gabriel is, but I love the upside here going up against Detroit next week, Tampa in week 13, the Browns in 14, New Orleans in 15, and Atlanta in week 16 in the fantasy playoffs. I think that Moore, I'm not going to say he's going to be a league winner, but could be a crucial part of a championship run.
I was just going through this Panthers offense recently, and I don't like it. In terms of a fantasy takeaway, Devin Funchess, DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel, their targets over the last 3 weeks: Funchess 13, Moore 13, Samuel 11. Moore's getting a carry a game.
Well, why do you need those guys when you got Christian McCaffrey, dude?
Well, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's hard to take away touches, to find these guys more touches when you're you have to take them away from Greg Olsen or Christian McCaffrey, which you're probably not going to do. They run a lot on the goal line, so I don't know, man. It's really tough to find a consistent option. They have a good matchup this week against the Lions, but I'm having difficulty trying to figure out which wide receiver is the one to play because they're all so close. Samuel offers the big playability. DJ Moore is great after the catch. Devin Funchess is the clear-cut number 1 red zone receiver for that team. There's just a lot of things.
All right, guys. So at running back, here's how we're going to do it. Would you put him at number 1 ahead of Rashaad Penny? Would you put him at number 2, or would you slate him back with that entire group? Derrick Henry keeps scoring. I don't know what's going on here, but apparently he's all of a sudden useful. Tags, what do you think?
No.
I don't want to do it either. He's got 4 touchdowns in 3 games, so I know a lot of people have been asking. I don't think he's a pickup.
I know what you mean. The thing is, he's probably owned in a lot of leagues, and if you own him for whatever reason, I'd be selling. I know he's had 4 touchdowns the last 3 weeks, but he's in a 70-30 time split, and he's not on the good side of that. He's getting goal line work. They were obviously
horrible offensive line too.
Yeah, the offensive line has been playing better. They actually looked really good against the Patriots. Now, the Patriots haven't been a really good defense this year. They've been really hit or miss. It's really tough to judge them, to be honest with you. Like, there's just so many variances in their performances this year that the Patriots defense I've just ruled them as very inconsistent. They got pushed around this weekend, and Derrick Henry looked better than he has all season, but he's still, again, like looking over the last 3 weeks, Deion Lewis has basically touched the ball 70% of the time compared to Henry's 30. So it's going back to that, like Bobby, we talked about it last year, obviously, when DeMarco Murray was on the team and Derrick Henry, you couldn't play Henry as anything more than an RB3 or flex with Murray going. So I kind of feel that same way about him now.
All right, Michael, let's keep Derrick Henry in there and add Mike Davis and Royce Freeman.
So to me, this is still Penny as the number one. I would go Davis, number two. I'd probably go Henry 3 and Freeman 4. I just don't see any reason why Freeman's role is going to grow in the slightest the rest of the season. Phillip Lindsay's been the best back for the entire season. He's been the best back in pretty much every single individual game for Denver, except for the one where he got ejected in the first quarter. I just don't see why suddenly Freeman's going to come back from injury and have a larger role. Maybe we revisit him as someone who we like in 2019, but for me, 2018, Denver's backfield belongs to Phillip Lindsay.
I don't imagine Lindsay is going to go away in 2019, but let's say Lindsay was to get hurt. Now, I didn't consider Freeman as one of these handcuff backup running back types because he's owned in 52% of leagues right now, but if he's available in your league, where would you put him compared to like Ware, Malcolm Brown, Giovanni Bernard? Because I think he would be useful here.
Yeah, I do too, but I would still have him behind all those guys just because then we get into a sort of position where Devontae Booker is not going to go away. Devontae Booker is going to have some sort of role in Denver's offense. And then B, it's just when we get this far down the overall fantasy depth chart, then I start to get to a point where I just want to bet on offenses. And I want to bet on Kansas City or bet on the Rams before I bet on Denver. So that pushes Freeman down for me too.
100% agree. I think this would be kind of like Tevin Coleman. Now, obviously, they're different types of players, but where he's a week-to-week, RB 14 to RB 20. And all those other guys, Gio Bernard, I'd put him in the top 12 almost every week.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a fair assessment. I like Royce Freeman a lot, but in that offense with Vance Joseph and Bill Musgrave, it's just terrible. I think next year, once they have a new coach, and they're going to have a new coach, I wonder if they're going to get, if Booker's good, he should be gone. But Lindsay and Freeman can form a solid 1-2 split. I think they make a great duo.
I think so too. I think that's a good duo. If you need a streamer this week, I don't think Wendell Smallwood is a bad pickup. I think the Eagles are going to be playing from behind in New Orleans. It's going to be a high-scoring game. Obviously, Smallwood is the most involved in that receiver core. He led the team in snaps this week. Tags, do you think he's a bad pickup if you're really desperate?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Like you'd rather have Jalen Richard, probably?
Yeah, I would. I'd rather have him or like Theo Riddick I would rather have. Just because there's so many running backs here. Knowing that Darren Sproles is probably never going to play football in the National Football League again, it kind of sucks because I wish his career didn't end the way it did the last 2 years, but it's still a timeshare between Clement, Adams, and Smallwood. Week over week, you have no confidence when putting any of those guys in your lineup.
Yeah. Okay, let's go 3 more names, then we'll end the show here. Doug Martin at Arizona, Peyton Barber at the Giants, and Ito Smith faced Dallas, still a little bit involved. Michael, who are you taking out of those 3?
I think out of really any of the running backs we've named, not just these 3, that Doug Martin's my favorite. The work's been there for him, right? And it doesn't really matter if the Raiders are keeping it close, if they're getting blown out. He's getting his 15 opportunities per game and didn't look bad this past week, right? 90-something total yards, involved, leading them on the ground, involved through the air. Doug Martin, I think, is surprisingly easy choice for me out of this trio.
Would you take him over Rashaad Penny?
I would, and I have more confidence in what his role is the rest of the way than I do in Penny's. I think Penny's got a higher ceiling, but I know what Doug Martin's going to be for the rest of the season in Oakland. I don't know that with Penny, especially. If Carson can come back as soon as next week, and I don't know if that's going to happen, but he could, and then that could totally just shunt Penny back to his 2 carries per game sort of role. So Doug Martin would be my number 1 guy in leagues where he's available.
Martin's running hard. He looks good. He doesn't look like a star like he did back early in his career, but I think he's a quality running back. I don't know if I agree that I would rather have him over Penny because I think Penny has more upside and Martin's just your RB3, RB4 type that, you can use him and feel fine about it. So, Tags, why don't you help me make up my mind here? Which way are you going and talk me into it?
Yeah, I would go Doug Martin. I just know that he has a more like a role that I can rely on. Like if he's not hurt, he's going to be getting, as Beller touched on, it's been 13 to like 18 touches per game. And if you can get that guaranteed role, give me that. I know it's not as good in his offense. I know that. But Rashaad Penny, he scored his first touchdown of the year this past week. I'm not going to all of a sudden jump in and say that he's like, oh my God, this is why they spent a first round pick. Chris Carson was out of the lineup. Mike Davis still got touches. He's not involved in the passing game, so he's game script dependent. So yeah, I'm going to go Doug Martin here.
All right, guys, that's all for today's show. Michael, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
You guys got it. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Take care. All right, and thanks to the sponsor of today's show, Tommy John. Get 20% off your first order. That's TommyJohn.com/fantasypros. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.